All right, we have our metal cut, and so now our next step is to bring our metal over to the soldering area where our torches are kept, and we're going to place the pieces of metal in what's called an annealing pan. This is an annealing pan. It has it's got a rotisserie, a little bearing on it, and then the pan actually contains pumice rock. So this rock can withstand high heat, and so we'll just deposit our pieces in the pumice rock and kind of distribute them. So that's going to be our that's going to prep us for being able to anneal and then eventually quench our pieces. So you'll notice that we've got torches that are hooked up to a acetylene tank, and this acetylene tank usually sits over here in the corner, and it's usually bolted to the wall. I've pulled it off of here just so I can show you closely what the various components of the torch are. This is going to be actually the first quiz is going to be over torch use and torch safety, so I want to make sure you're well aware of how to operate this, how to turn it on, how to shut it off. Now, acetylene is a highly volatile gas. You have to be very cautious with this. We are using acetylene and air for our fuel that we're going, or for our gas and air that we're going to be using to be able to heat up our metal. And this torch draws air through small venturis that are a part of the tip. Okay, so it's going to suck air from around the torch in and mix with the acetylene that comes out of this tank. So again, if there's a quiz question about what gas are we using, we are using acetylene as our gas to heat and solder our metal, or anneal and solder our metal. Now, the tank, the reason it's bolted down is that if this tank gets tipped over, I don't know if there's any James Bond fans, but you may have remembered, if you are, a particular episode where James Bond knocks the head of a tank of gas off with a sledgehammer, and then it goes through a cinder block wall. You might say, well, that's just James Bond, right? That's movie effects. No, that would actually happen. If you knock this head off, it basically becomes a propelled object that would go through a wall. So keep that in mind. This is supposed to stay bolted down. Again, I'm just pulled this out just for this demo so that we could go over and you can see close up kind of what the tank looks like. Now, the main part of the tank that you need to be familiar with is first the valve, the main shutoff valve. And this valve is what we open up to be able to get gas then into what's called the regulator. Now, when I crack that valve open, when I open this up, it's going to be, it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, so I'm going to open this up, and the first gauge on the right, these are quiz questions, by the way. This gauge on the right, first gauge, is going to show me how much gas is in this tank. All right? So when I open this valve, you're going to see this needle on this valve shoot up. And I'm going to open it slowly. All right? Now, this needle also rose up. Now, sometimes it won't. If someone's backed off the regulator, it won't rise up. So I'm going to show you what it looks like without that regulator being on. So let me just drain this torch for a second. Okay, now normally when we're done using the torch, we back this regulator out. Okay, so I want to show you what this would normally be like in a situation where you're coming in the studio for the first time. All right, so we open this valve up, and you'll notice just this gauge should rise. We got a little bit of a rise out of that one, but all right. So, and you'll notice I only crack this open about a quarter of a turn. You don't want to go over a quarter of a turn. All right, that's a quiz question as well. Open this a quarter of a turn, and you can see that we now see how much gas is in our tank on this right-hand gauge. Now, why do we only turn it a quarter of a turn? Well, if something were to happen, let's say you were using the torch and something started to malfunction, and you were or someone dropped it, or they somebody had they fainted or something, and that torch is still on and it drops and hits the floor. The first thing you should do is go for this valve, not the valve here. Go for the valve here, okay? Unless you can easily get to this and shut it off, I would go for this main valve, okay? And the reason we want a quarter of a turn only is that by only being a quarter turn, if we need to shut this off, it's like done. It's not, we're not sitting here going, you know, trying to like close this down. So that is why you only open this valve a quarter turn to be able to, you know, open up the valve so that you're getting gas to your regulator. Now, the gauge on the left registers our PSI, or pounds per square inch. And normally when you first open this up, it may not show anything at all if the regulator is backed out. Now, eventually, we want to get gas from the regulator down to the torch, and these have 2 torches hooked up to each one, okay? Now, you feed the regulator in, and you're gonna watch this gauge go up. See that? It's going up. Now we're at 10 PSI. Now we're at 15 PSI. So this left-hand gauge, it tells me how much pressure the gas is going to the torch, okay? And I have to dial the pressure up. Now, I never want to exceed 15 PSI. If I keep going with this regulator and turning it in, it's going to keep rising, and we're going to be in this red zone here, all right? The danger zone, all right? So never go above 15 PSI, all right? And then these 2 valves just open up the splitter. There's a splitter that splits the one outlet into 2 outlets to go to the 2 torches, one here and one here. So each station, we've got 2 stations, soldering station, one over here, one over there. We have 2 people, and even with you know, coronavirus, we are okay to have 2 people per station, so 4 people total. All right. Okay, so now we have gas coming up here. Now, one thing that you need to make sure that when you start to open all this stuff up, that you have this valve closed, righty-tighty, okay, or clockwise, okay? So this valve needs to be shut. If it's not shut and you open all this stuff up, you're going to be spewing gas out into the room, right? And we have ventilation, but you do not want to be just like letting gas run out of the torch. That would be bad, okay? Okay, so we have the torch, and we're set to go with the machine, with the tank. Okay. Now I'm going to show you the shutdown procedure. Then let's say we're done using the torch, how to shut this tank off, and then I'll put it back and you know, put it against the wall. So the procedure for shutting down the tank would be to close the valve off. You're right, obviously, and then I would actually start in reverse. We'd start with the valve and we'd tighten this down. You'll notice nothing changed, right? That's because, and if it did change, it would tell us we have a leak in the system somewhere, but nothing changes. It's shut down and it's still showing pressure. Well, that's because there's still gas in the lines. And this procedure is called bleeding the lines. Now, I used to not be too strict on bleeding the lines, but as time has passed, I've witnessed a few things that have caused me to kind of reconsider that. And one of those things is when I used to teach at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, there was an engineering lab that had an oxyacetylene tank set up. So it had oxygen and acetylene. And someone was welding nearby, and a little ember from the welder dropped on the acetylene hose, and it actually ignited. And an oxyacetylene rig usually has a lot of hose, a long length of hose to it, and it burned through and ignited. Now, luckily, someone had shut the tank off, because had they not, that could have ignited gas all the way in the line, all the way back up through the regulator and into the tank and blown up the tank. Now, if this acetylene gas, as I mentioned earlier, is very volatile, if this were to blow up, I mean, it could like level the building, you know. And so this is why I stress having a specific quiz on just this so that you know how to use the tool. I don't want you to be so scared, though, that you don't want to use it. We have to use this as a tool, and as long as you're being responsible, you shouldn't have to worry. So we've shut the valve off, right? And we want to bleed the gas out of this line so that in case this hose was compromised in some way, some manner, there would be no gas in it that it could ignite. And so what I'll do is, again, all of my other valves are still the way I had them, even the regulator valve. And then I'm just going to hold the torch up to the ventilation, and I'm just going to drain the gas off. And you're going to see this gauge is going to go down, and so is this gauge. Okay, so here we go. This gauge is a little faulty here, that's why I'm having to kind of tap it. And I don't hear any hissing coming out anymore, no gas, right? And now I can tighten the valve down. We've drained all the gas out of these lines, okay? And I can even bleed the other one to see there's a little bit left in there. That's why that wasn't going down. So there's a little left in the other torch. So now everything's bled, and then I can just come back and tighten down these knobs to close off the hose. And then I can loosen this up. Now you don't have to back this all the way out. You just want to back it out, 3-4 turns, and then we're good to go. And that's it. Okay? That's the bleeding procedure for this tank. Okay? So again, if something were to happen where something was malfunctioning, first thing you do is you go for this valve to shut it off. Right, and if the person that's opened it has only opened it a quarter turn, everything will be fine. Okay, so it'll be fast. We will not bleed the torch during every use. We won't bleed the lines. Normally, I say that to the end of class. So when someone, like if I come in the morning, I open up the valves, or someone comes in to use it in the morning, we'll open up the valves, and then at the end of class, when we do our cleanup, I'll maybe ask somebody to shut the valves off, bleed the lines, and then we know everything's ready to close down the studio. So again, make sure you read through your torch safety handout. It covers this information as well, so you can read through that, and you can see how to properly utilize the torch. Now I'm going to put this back and change the wall, and then we'll continue from there. Okay.